Hello, my name is David Wise, and I'm the creative director here at mfg.world. And for the last 4 years, we've put on the Ellipsis Lecture Series where artists, designers, writers, and makers are invited to share their ideas on what it means to push culture forward today. Those invited are imagining new ways of shaping brand and design, pushing the boundaries within their profession, and leading practices that resist any rigid form of definition. And today's speaker is no different. I first came across Karisa's design while in graduate school. It was through the incredible work done for Commend and the label Revenge under the studio Will Work for Good that I began to see exactly how community could be brought together through design and a scene could be developed. It's this ongoing stream of experimentation with form, material, color, and type, crafted with a sort of stoic minimalism that is hard to describe, but instantly identifiable that I sort of fell in love with. And without further ado, I'm happy to kind of kick it over to Karissa. Um, Feel free to take it away.
Thanks, David. That's so sweet. It's really nice to have this opportunity to share with you all. And David, we met when our paths crossed in Philly. I did a little reading group called Bodies and Data with Jessa Lingle from U of Penn, and you came to some of the discussions and films. So for me, that's just like such a nice example of how you can set up a situation no matter how temporary and connections can last or pop up again. And like, I'm glad to be a part of this. Congratulations on Ellipses. It kind of gave me an excuse or a reason to reconsider parts of my past and what's on my mind now. So I'll do like a really brief intro myself. Um, I'm part of Will Work for Good, or WWFG, a small design studio with Kevin O'Neill. You can see him there on the left. That's Kevin taking a sign literally. And this is an old studio that we had in Brooklyn that I just like, even though it's low res, whatever. That was a good space. We did a lot of fun things there. Um, and we sort of started off interested in working with minimal means. So when I think back, we bopped around a lot, but one of the first places we worked out of was Pyramid Atlantic Print and Papermaking Studio in DC. And we got the space in exchange for a brand refresh. So on the left is their letterpresses, where we were individually letterpressing album covers. And on the right is the logo that Kevin came up with for their identity, which they still use to this day. And that was like back in 2008, I think, if you can believe. And while we were down there, I was running a printmaking gallery, and these were my old business cards that we used repurposed paper, like old prints, cut down and reprinted on. So they're all unique, and they all have like really lovely textures because they're beautiful printmaking papers. I really like those. And while that was going on, Kevin was also maintaining this website called Meet Your Printmaker as a design resource for designers to find everything from lithography to letterpress and lenticular, screen printing, all kinds of things. This is a really old site, so like I had to go on the Wayback Machine to take some screenshots, but it kind of led us to create an exhibition of the same name. So we put on a Meet Your Printmaker exhibit in DC featuring printers from all the studios on the site. And it was great. We did some events around it and it was really fun. So in the years that we've been making things for artists and musicians and friends, our practice has evolved and it's kind of become our understanding of design as maintenance. That's the title. And my design research is focused on the intersection of care and culture in particular. So I promise this is the last business card I'm showing, but this is another version, another iteration of our practice where I was, also identifying these other side projects that we were building based on care and culture. So I'm going to try to share an approach to design that threads together many ideas that shape my process. And sometimes I'm going to zoom into like actual work examples. but sometimes it's going to be broader than that. So I'll try to like indicate what is the work and what is just like thoughts and things borrowed. It's a loose weave, so it might all fall apart, but you might be able to pick up the pieces and take them somewhere else. So I invite that. The attempt here is to decenter like a business mind frame or heroic idea of design to offer other ways to practice design that are in relation to life or in support of life. Fully aware that I'm falling short myself sometimes, and my cat is really, really wanting to be a part of this. So this is my goal. Yes. Okay. Now go away. All right. So this first section, we're going to get into it. The handle. So in the book, What's the Use? Independent scholar and theorist Sarah Ahmed writes, an object made in order to be used can be called designed. So that's the really broad working definition I'm starting with here. The objects we make are not art, as in non-functional. And I just knocked over a keyboard. Sorry about that. So where was I? They're not functional. They serve a practical purpose and they contribute to a kind of world building. I'm not saying art is useless, but that's a different talk. So I'm just thinking about like functional things here. And Ahmed also said an object can be how you encounter a system. You can trace the production, the authorship, the economies behind the making of a thing to unpack layers of meaning and connection. And this is a hand sanitizer I saw at a nature center that was quite amusing and said many things. And when I started thinking about what I'd talk about, the first thing I came up with was support systems. How do we design support systems? Because I'd say the systems to support life these days are failing and or threatened. These are some signs I found at medical institutions. So my ongoing project called Data Feels has been focused on how patient groups form collective action online. And I've traced their digital boundaries, and I've spoken with different social media groups that help people find international treatment options. I've experienced remote healing myself from an electronic composer and Reiki master, and I've explored tools like hacked medical devices with open software. So with Data Fields, there's been zines, there's been events, there's been text published based on the research in different places. And the focus has been on digital tools of collective care. I'm interested in Donna Haraway's, oh, there's more zines. These are some covers. Data Feels Apart, Data Feels Stray. There's a few. So I'm interested in Donna Haraway's idea of the cyborg and how adopting a diffused sense of the body has provided a sense of shared experiences and resources. On the left is a work by Lynn Randolph from the '85 Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway, and it shows this interconnectedness of space and nature and technology and self. And on the right is a selfie I found of a person going through a medical treatment that bears a striking resemblance. Her identity is slightly obscured by the filter that adds animal features to her, and her infusion hand extends towards the viewer. It's like a realization of the cyborg, the biological and the machine recoding to expand the boundaries of self. The impact of this sort of expanding idea of self and collective action can be major, despite the limitations of precarious or standard medical practices, insurance policies, prejudices, and financial circumstances. It relies on lots of uncompensated reproductive labor, and the value it generates has often quickly been absorbed or squashed by dominant systems. But I think it's worth interrogating the systems we maintain, what utility they offer, and what values we assign. So part of my project has been looking towards systems in nature to help understand life-sustaining relationships and systems from other perspectives. This is an oversimplification, but it's sort of like, how is a listserv like a ghost pipe? Or what can lichen teach us about interdependence? And I can drop links to the video essays if you want to see. But when a close friend experienced a profound loss recently, she said she was looking for handles, for things to grab onto. And I love that. So here's some examples. These on the left, these are molds that ceramic artists use to form handles for mugs. And as someone who has grab bars around my home, I see grab bars like the one on the right as a sign that we are trying to adapt, to make things safer, to accommodate with handles. So some forms of support declare themselves like a handle or a buttress. Like check out these really great little buttresses that I found at a greenhouse. So that they created these support structures for cacti using hair clips and twist ties and bits of bamboo. So part of finding support is finding new functions for the things around us. I recently discovered something that all nurses and care workers know. A bath towel placed under a body can help shift weight without needing to pull or tug on the body. It makes the movement with less effort and strain for both the one on the towel and the one pulling the towel, which is great. It doesn't look like a device designed for the function of moving a body. It's primarily been used to grab hands. It wasn't sold to me in a mobility device catalog. We just unlocked all this power and potential from a simple piece of cloth. And now it makes a daily activity easier. It feels like a magic trick, it really does. A towel becomes a handle. And it's that sort of perception shift that I'm keen to explore next. Okay, now we're on to the container. Just like stay with me, this is going places. In the late 1970s in Manhattan, an environmental artist group formed with contributions by Jenny Holzer and Colin Fitzgibbon, Peter Naden, Richard Prince, Robin Winters, and Peter Fent. Side note, Peter was Bulwark for Good's only artist in residence. That's him with the green t-shirt. This group had done some projects together that were critical of big oil. They were taking satellite imagery and land art models to try to impact migration patterns for birds. And by 1980, some of the members founded what was called Ocean Earth Development Corporation as an architecture practice. And their organizing principle that shaped all of their designs was the water basin. Ocean Earth, I'm going to read this. Ocean Earth is conceived of saltwater basins, encompassing all the life, nutrients, salts, and soils within any concavity of the Earth's crust. Land slopes, it drains, leaving hollows that with the gravitational movement of sediments and waters stir up vortical patterns. The planet's saltwater circulatory systems revolves around Antarctica, flushing through the Atlantic basin, swept into the Pacific and Indian basins. And with buildings, so with Earth. Environments, structures are a condition of their plumbing. The efforts by architecture to save energy and alter nature are in correlation with its ability to keep things flowing. So basins offer a radical remapping of territory with the ambition of reorienting ecologies, policies, states, economies, you name it. A common technique used by Ocean Earth's proposals is the disassembled map, cutting up continents to reflect more natural shapes. When working with basin units, land above and below water are equal significance. The distinctions that continents once enjoyed as a coherent whole no longer applies. So it can be a little disorienting to start reading their maps at first. But they also issued an atlas as the first atlas of the world according to its saltwater basins, because they wanted anyone, anywhere to be able to work with the basin unit toward the health of the planet. Even though Ocean Earth was concerned primarily with environmental issues like climate change and endangered species, it was a work of art rather than science, which led them in this direction. Duchamp's urinal is the most influential art piece of the 20th century. I wish I could do Peter's voice because there's quite a tenor to this voice. It's so influential. In what way is it influential? Well, influential as outlined by Jack Burnham in his book, Beyond Modern Sculpture. It changes the idea of sculpture from that which is on a pedestal to that which is in a gravity field, an entropy field, a breakdown field, some sort of basin. And well, here you have a basin, the Pacific Basin and the Atlantic Basin and the Indian Ocean Basin. They are all urinals, so to speak, around Antarctica. And that is the influence of Marcel Duchamp. Years after I became familiar with Ocean Earth, the credit to Duchamp came into question. It was at a feminist gathering called We Not I at Artist Space in New York, when I heard Meredith Sparks share some research on a different origin of the fountain. She introduced us to a less historicized figure, dubbed the first Dadaist in New York. Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Lorenhoven. That's her. I'm not sure if she's featured more in art history these days. I haven't taken an art history class in some time, so I'll provide a little background just in case. She's referred to as the Baroness and best known as a poet. She had been titling found objects and deeming them art since at least 1913. And her materials for sculpture and what she called living collage costumes were mostly things she found on the street or shoplifted. She epitomized Dada, anarchy, sexual freedom, and creativity. And when Duchamp arrived in New York, he called the Baroness the future. She wrote love-chemical relationship in response to his large glass. But ultimately, gender and status allowed Duchamp to ascend within art and society in ways denied to the Baroness. And I should say there was a Baron, but he was like not in the US, so she was on her own. And between February and October of 1917, she lived in the streets of Philadelphia, struggling in poverty. And it is speculated that she acquired a urinal, signed it, and had it sent to the Society of Independent Artists exhibition under the pseudonym Richard Mutt. The tag attached to the urinal seen in this photograph of the original was written in German with a pun that allowed it to be read two ways, either to give a poor account of oneself, or put another way, which sounds exactly the same in German. It also reads, for somebody to exhibit admissible evidence of R, like capital R, Mutt. A double meaning is achieved because the German word Armut, A-R-M-U-T, meaning poverty, is pronounced the same way as capital R, period, capital M, Mutt. Duchamp was a member of the Independents, and in the days leading up to the exhibition, he wrote a letter to his sister that is in the archives, mentioning that one of his women friends, under a pseudonym, had sent in a porcelain urinal as a sculpture that had been rejected. He didn't claim authorship until after the Baroness died. And I don't think there are any significant moves to credit her with authorship of the fountain have been accepted in the mainstream art world. And I'm not arguing for that. The research that Meredith Sparks did is an effort to trouble the narrow assumptions and claims we ascribe to creative objects and practices. But the Metropolitan Museum of Art does give Baroness partial credit for another piece of upside-down plumbing. It's a ready-made from 1917 called God, a cast iron plumbing trap photographed by Morton Schomburg in Philly. And the significance of this work wasn't lost on Ocean Earth either. In a 2009 article from ... written by Angie Kiefer, she quotes Fend as saying, icons govern action. The urinal, like Morton Schomburg's God, which is just a piece of plumbing, governs subsequent action. Throughout much of Western culture, the notion of the state has been embodied in the leader, the hero, the standing figure. If an icon is terrain or surroundings instead of a role model or hero, then it causes a different orientation of social activity. We come to see the ideal of our surroundings, not a leader. The surroundings are whatever bowl we happen to be in. Challenging issues of authorship in art history feels so meager and petty in the face of like everything going on right now, like fascism, genocide, the daily stripping away of people's autonomy and personhood. I'm just going to say all that. Even at the event when we talked about the Baroness and urinal story, the concern or reaction from the group moved towards abolishing the canon rather than revising it. But yet the story still sticks with me. And I think it's because I'm attracted to this reorientation of our surroundings instead of looking for leaders and heroes. The basin was drawing attention to bodily functions and fluids, definitely, in a way that is currently associated with queer and feminist art, and was also acting as container in a way that is similar to another great piece by science fiction author Ursula K. Le Guin. But I'll just take a moment to say this is also another picture of the Baroness, and this is a more recent picture of Peter Fant, who is sort of like the last standing member of the Ocean Earth group. So in the carrier bag theory of fiction by Ursula K. Le Guin, she says the earliest cultural device was probably a carrier bag. Similar to Fenn's reading A Fountain, she turns away from the hero killing story and suggests but either with or before that tool that forces energy outward, like a spear, we've made the tool that brings energy home. But it didn't start with the urinal. Her object is much older and softer. She reaches back to the very earliest inventions made by humans, which were likely containers to hold products that had been gathered with some kind of sling or like a net. And she offers the container as a way of reshaping the world away from the violence of techno-heroic domination towards a redefining of science as primarily cultural carrier bag. Her stories and the stories we tell from that view organize around landscape and being a kind of critter among all kinds of critters in life. Le Guin refuses the linear arrow of time as progress and might appreciate the spiral of a drain or the cycle of currents. But I love the image she offers. The natural, proper, fitting shape of the novel might be that of a sack, a bag. A book holds words, words hold things, things bear meaning. And I think it can extend to other endeavors besides fiction. I keep thinking the shape of design might be a tote bag, or any container really. What happens when we take the container as the shape of anarchy or future building? Not very anarchic, but this is a tote we did for an organic wine label in the UK. Okay, so here we are. We're going to keep going. The collection. So now let's get to the use for a container. What is the collection, the gathering? What can we pool together? Personally, as a gardener and an amateur botanist, the container for collecting totally resonates in the most literal interpretation. Like I gather vegetables in baskets and seeds in jars or envelopes, and I gift them or I grow them in repurposed plastic packages. I pick cranberries and from dry bogs in my neighborhood, and I, like build them up in little Tupperware containers. I forage mushrooms that come home in paper bags, and they get used for spore prints, like on the left, or we could eat them, like the ones on the right. And I also collect lichen that has fallen or dislodged from their host surfaces, and I put those in jars to ferment, or they go in pots to boil. And then those become the dyes that I use to create yarns of gold and orange and purple. And I hadn't thought much about the containers unless they were forgotten, like when I had to stuff my pockets or improvise. But the act of collecting and the pleasure of finding and bringing treasures home that I get to use later is extended and enjoyed with a container or a basket or a bag. And staying with the literal for a minute, I have to acknowledge record collections. Much like a book, the record is a kind of container for holding music, protecting a collection of tracks, The largest body of work we've produced is for the record label Revenge International, like David said, or some people call it RVNG. And design is the maintenance work that holds the pieces together and makes them fit for distribution. Revenge is a collection that continues to grow and builds community. You can see one of my spore prints on this Discovery Zone cover, but most of this is Kevin. Oh, I did this illustration of here. Yeah, there's a few. And then here's some more. We've got one. This has a vinyl cling that you can reapply. This is a photo I took of some shadows. There's some sky photos here. Yeah, there's this series is there's this series that has the binding done backwards to create a different shape to things. We are sort of like undoing the expectations and using these little flaps that are usually glued as different graphic elements. This series over here has taken its form from the Folkways collection. It's called the Freakways series. So there's like different portraits applied and tipped in on like textured paper. And here's some more. It never ends. You can see here down in the pink, this is some of the letterpressed records that we did at Pyramid Atlantic all that time ago. There's a whole lot. It just keeps going. We have a lot of records in the house. And beyond album covers, there's also all the comms that go with it. And for a little while, I was doing interviews with some of the artists, like talking to Susan Chowney about her sound design for a pinball machine. She also made the Coca-Cola sound. And Pauline Anna Strom and her wild imaginings. And after we had this conversation where she like came up with 9 things that don't exist in her life, some of them started to happen. It was very cool. And beyond the literal, the container also relates to collective experience, like gathering together in study. Like collective study for me has been an ongoing thing I have to do. Collective study opened up other ways for me to experience my life and my work and to question the assumptions and values that I started with. So the container or basin unit or tote bag applies to reading groups and collectives and event series that I've helped put together over the years. This first one is called Policy People. It was a project responding to the Harvey and Moten book, The Undercommons, and it took shape as a series of commissioned texts, a symposium, and other events, some of which took place at the Command Record Shop. And they're all archived on this website. These are some screenshots of the site. And I could drop that in the chat too. And then this is another thing I put together called Foreign Bodies. It was a residency at the Jan van Eyck Academy for a philosophy of public health PhD candidate who was studying at the University of Maastricht. And at the time, I was looking to see if I could get folks from like World Health groups and pharma companies to engage with designers and artists on our terms. I kind of bring them into our space. So this was a series of lectures and talks and Zooms. So yeah, I've been Zooming for quite some time. And then another series is disassemblies. This came from a collective that I helped form called Knowledge is a Does. Knowledge is a Does, or KIAD, K-I-A-D. And we started a series of events based on the socially concerned texts we were reading. So like we did movie screenings and this is like a thrift store, a really big thrift store. And we just took the furniture, the secondhand furniture that for sale and made like little living room setups and showed films. We did a poetry reading at an anarchist space. We also had like a party at a local gay club, the bar. And then since then, we've continued to read and write together, and we hold these sporadic events. Like this was at a performance space in Brussels. We did a couple of things together, zines and readings. There were we did events at the record shop Command in New York, and yeah, this is also from Command. There's a poster we did in the background. Because it's in the gathering and sharing of stories and experiences that we make space and we take up space and we hold space for each other. So that sounds like a collection to me. Here's some more. These were more events we did together. And if I reach back to Sarah Ahmed's text again, remember that usefulness? Usefulness is a form of memory to remember what you are for and that we are all parts. And it's echoed or reinforced by one of my earliest conversations with Canaries. So let me take a beat to introduce you to Canaries. The Canaries is a listserv for people with chronic illness and a gendered experience with healthcare. And we were brought together by diagnoses or symptoms to find our own ways of learning and caring for each other. It was co-founded back in 2013, and it's like kind of impressive that it still exists. It's operated in many ways as an in-person support group. It's been a public-facing art collective, and it's been a private listserv. That's kind of its current formation. Canaries as an art project is sort of archived 2013 to 2017. I joined around 2018, and I've been co-moderator of this listserv since 2019. We shared new symptoms, medicines, doctor recommendations, recipes, experiences, goes on. And for a while, we had a reading group. And on the left are some flyers I did for the reading group. And on the right is an event I did with another Canary. So it still is going strong and doing things. And one of my early conversations with one of the founders named Jessie Cohen, she described finding the first Canaries and how it felt like medicine to talk. She offered guidance to me that the most healing thing for her was finding ways to reincorporate the most difficult parts of herself. So as I'm thinking of what Sarah says, usefulness is a form of memory to remember what you are for. It reminds me that Jessie said, remembering is the opposite of dismembering. And for years, I've interpreted that as being about embodied experience and caring for a body that fails you. But like when I was putting this together, I started thinking, remembering is a way to find community. It could, and like bringing members to your community. It could de-escalate division or uncover the parts we play within systems. So the parts we play can change in the ways we use what's available to us. And I'm thinking of a research paper that suggested long COVID is the first instance where patients identified and named themselves before the medical community recognized and studied the condition. On the left here is a selfie of Amy Watson the day she tested for COVID, and her trucker hat inspired her to describe survivors with persistent symptoms as long haulers. And that's where the name came from. To me, it's incredibly powerful what sick people were able to do across continents to take their lived experiences that are typically diminished as anecdotal evidence and make such a body of evidence that just using social media comments that it had to be addressed. Like the evidence was overwhelming. To me, there's a kind of lineage that could be traced to Ada Lovelace, who footnoted a lecture so extensively it became its own work. And this piece from the footnotes is often cited as the first computer program. And I'm fascinated when marginal material collects itself and becomes incredibly generative. Ahmed wrote, "We have trouble using when we fail an assumption, like the inconvenience of this library table that says there are no seats available, or this bench that has fallen victim to erosion." When a sick or disabled person encounters design as inaccessible, there's a break in the system. Like this cover brings attention to the assumption that stairs are designed for walking. Musician Robert Wyatt and his band posed for this after he became paraplegic. But we may find other ways to build new collectives out of humans and other actors. I'm interested in when we queer the use of things to adapt them to fit our needs. Okay, I think this is the last section. Prepare. I haven't quite figured out how to resolve the relationships between everything yet, but there's something about breaks and mending that want to come together as reparative design, creating conditions for life. So when a system is extractive or controlling, as our social and health systems tend to be, I distrust smooth and legible designs that engage that system or enable that system. If a thing or an object complies to norms, then it is unlikely to support disabled, queer, and other ways of being. If the default is to get better soon, it will do a crappy job at supporting chronic and progressive illness. If the system is designed to aspire to individualism and independence, it intrinsically devalues and distorts the way all life is dependent, like my cat. And like this smart water bottle that will keep track of your hydration, and this face scanner that will fit you for eyeglasses. But in the process, it's also just like extracting data from patients in like all these boundless ways. At the scale of society and industry, it often seems that patients are put to use. So what if we go back to the urinals and terrain? I look toward other species and different aesthetic cues like inconsistencies and dependencies and awkwardness. Where are tools being used improperly? So here's some pieces of evidence I found. These are some pillows on the left that are being off-gassed on a fire escape prior to an event that was going to be held for folks with chemical sensitivities. And on the right, there's a group video chat with members of an organization called What Would an HIV Doula Do? And this feels radically different from medical service, but it offers incredible levels of care. When we take heroes off pedestals, we can reach for each other. What is made by disabled and sick collectives is often makeshift and non-compliant, and it may be hard to conform to measurements, and it can expose or intentionally break systems and processes. But it invites new members to join in the work, and it transfers agency to the users. So the objects are changing with use. My preferred term for this approach to design is called kludgy. Since the 1960s, kludgy has been used to describe patchy computer systems made up of poorly matched components. They are inelegant designs that work well, but for the wrong reasons. An example of a kludgy design is this old ad on the left for a medical device. It suggests you can upgrade from a janky kit of parts to one seamless unit that's featured in the blue thing in the corner here. It's not something that can be tampered with. It's foolproof. It's one size fits all. But everyone's access needs are unique. Opportunities to modify are necessary and often inelegant. And when I found this old ad on the left, it looked strangely similar to the hacked medical device used by folks with type 1 diabetes that I'm featuring here on the right. In one of the more compelling examples of the quantified self, they were able to access source codes and fine-tune insulin delivery based on their own patterns and rhythms. And for a brief time, patients were collaborating with the medical community to build better tools, get faster FDA approvals, and share their data. At the time, I was worried about how patients would be exploited and who would see profit from the community tinkering at home. But it turned out that giving patients access to the code was too great a liability, and later models were improved and they had locked systems. So you can't remotely order a lethal insulin infusion, for instance, which, I mean, that's a definite trope in like crime dramas, but it's, I think, not too common. And this led to a market for old discontinued insulin pumps that still had the security flaw. So people were like trying to find the old ones because they didn't want to lose that control that they had when they were able to update the code. Because interfacing with technology improperly, not as the system intended, made room for people and codes and chips to all forge new relationships. And a repair-centered design ethic looks towards the kludgy as signs of mending. By not black boxing the system, but exposing its vulnerabilities. They offer a reality that is ambiguous, complicated, and multi-directional. A kludge is open to the possibility of change, alteration, and interaction rather than forestalling any meddling by the end user. And it reveals that it's made up of parts that could be made otherwise. For a while, my neighbor was totally committed to repairing her lawn ornament. And even though I wish she explored other options than Gorilla Tape, I appreciate the effort and the variety of configurations that were explored. Okay, last part here. The basin unit reminds us to look to the landscape and the terrain we're in. And at the moment, I find myself near the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. It's a place full of lore and sparsely developed terrain with an aquifer underneath, and the acidic, sandy, and nutrient-poor soils are good for white cedar bogs, and they're prone to fires, and not everything can survive. It's kind of a unique environment. And due to the conditions, species that thrive here have some incredible adaptations. Like there are lots of kinds of carnivorous plants. Like these are some, they're called sundews. You can see their little teeth all over. And these are bladderworts on the left and pitcher plants on the right. And all of these plants draw nutrients from insects. They eat them. And some of the plants are parasitic, like mistletoe, or have developed special relationships to other species to help them survive. I'm particularly interested in Hudsoni. I don't know. My botanist friends would be so mad I fumbled the pronunciation. Hudsonia ericoides. It's in the family of rock roses, but it's commonly called pine barren heather. It's a very small, low shrub with little yellow flowers in the spring that the bees love. Hudsonia can appear soon after a fire, and it survives in acidic, sandy soil. And that's because of a relationship it has to a fungus, which you can't see, it's underground. The fungus helps nourish the plant and doesn't allow other plants to grow in the area. In such a nutrient-poor environment, having less competition is useful for the survival of the Hudsonia. It's not at all clear how the fungus benefits, but it's these kinds of unequal dependencies that are naturally occurring phenomenon and are often understudied or barely noticed. But like, just draw me in. Their ways of being seem more basin-like, footnote-like than a hero. Okay, so I've offered a few design elements here. A handle, a container, a collection. Inspired by last week's talk, I selected some of my lichen books here as a collection. And a repair. But it's okay if it doesn't all come together to form a coherent whole. Like all maintenance work, it's an ongoing effort, an effort that, like the fungus, might support something or someone else to be in the world. It's our incompleteness that inclines us towards one another. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.